Do you think it's possible to become educated without school? Like, could someone who has never followed a curriculum for their entire childhood still be successful? Could they get into college? Even graduate from college? The correct answer is yes. It can be done, and it has been done. I know this because I've talked to someone who did all of those things. But before we get into the interview, let me say this. If you're like me, you're less interested in the amazing thing that one person happened to somehow pull off, and more interested in improving education for everyone. And at first it might seem like this story is too much of an outlier to be relevant for all of us normal people, but this story of growing up without school and doing so successfully is a rare opportunity for us to hone in on the things that are truly necessary to becoming educated once you strip away all the bells and whistles of school. There is a lot to learn here, if you can resist the urge to treat this story like an outlier. And you're going to be tempted. You're going to be like, I guess she's just some kind of super genius, or she just got really lucky. But that's your brain trying to take shortcuts. There are more interesting reasons why this story worked out the way that it did, and we can figure out what those reasons are. Now, you might also want to say, well, she had access to resources that not everyone has access to. And you'd be right, but don't stop there. As you go through this interview, listen carefully. What are those resources? What role do those resources actually play? What specific things are helpful? And how do those things compare with what we do in schools? What would it take to make the core of this story accessible to everyone? So with those questions swimming around in the back of your mind, let's get into the interview.
My name is Meghan Chung. I'm 22 years old. I've been unschooled my entire life. I have 3 younger siblings that I still live at home with, and they're also all currently being unschooled. I just graduated from NC State with my bachelor's in animal science and just completed my vet school application, so I'll find out in February if I get into vet school to start classes in August.
By the way, this interview was recorded a while ago now. This footage is from September of 2020, which is like a year and a half ago. I am bad at putting out YouTube videos in a timely fashion. But now that some time has passed, I'm happy to report that Meghan did get into vet school. I reached out and she told me she's just starting her 2nd semester at NC State's College of Veterinary Medicine. Anyway, I won't keep interrupting. Back to the interview. Meghan had just told us that she's been unschooled her entire life. Let's start with the basic thing here so we're all on the same page. How would you define unschooling?
So when people ask me, like, how were you raised or why do you call it unschooling? So my mom likes to call it life schooling. She doesn't like the term unschooling because a lot of people think that just means that you're not learning, which isn't the case. I would say that unschooling is homeschooling without a set curriculum or defined set time during the day that you have to do schoolwork. So homeschooling would be where you have a curriculum, there's a certain amount of time that you're supposed to do the schoolwork every day, where unschooling is kind of letting the kids learn what they want when they want to learn it at their own pace.
One of the first questions I get when I try to tell people about unschooling is, well, if there's no curriculum and nothing set, nothing predetermined, how do you make sure the kids learn anything at all? Won't they just not do any learning?
Yeah, and so it was really interesting growing up to watch because I've always been a self-motivated learner. And so I've kind of taken the initiative and learned things on my own and kind of worked on workbooks at my own pace just because I thought that they were fun. I would read books about animals that I was interested in, whereas my brother, he would just sit on Minecraft all day, every day for hours and hours at a time. And everyone would talk to my mom and be like, aren't you going to make him learn? Aren't you going to make him do schoolwork? Like, isn't this unhealthy for him? She's like, he'll learn what he wants to learn when he wants to learn it. He's learning through Minecraft. He's learning architecture and how to build his Minecraft houses. He's learning how to communicate with his friends on his server. He's learning math and learning computer coding. So he's learning all those things. He just doesn't realize it, and we don't realize it. And so that was really cool to watch him grow up. And now he's, of course, getting a 4.0 at Wake Tech Community College and about to transfer to UNC Chapel Hill for his nursing degree. So it's been really neat to watch different personalities and how it's still not the same track even though we're in the same household.
So it sounds like it's not just a thing that works for one type of personality. It's not just for super self-motivated, academically oriented kids.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have gone to college and graduated, and your brother has gone to college. And how do you go from not having any formal curriculum to getting into college? Yeah,
so I actually have it right here. It's my fake high school diploma that my mom filled out online and then printed out. It says Chung Academy because we're with the Chungs. And then she signed off on it, and my dad signed off on it as the principal and vice principal. Because to go to community college, you have to show proof that you've graduated high school. And with unschooling, there's no curriculum or coursework or transcript to send them. So we had to basically make it up and say, like, what have you learned in life? And let's put it on paper for them so that the school can see that you have learned things, even though we haven't been learning it in the traditional way. So to apply to Wake Tech, I had to send them my fake transcript and my fake diploma, and then take an AccuPlacer test. So that was a 3-hour-long test where it gave you math questions and English essay questions. And the math ones, it would spit you out a question. If you got it wrong, it would give you an easier one. If you got it right, it would give you harder ones, and really challenged me because I'd never seen math written in that format before. I'd always seen it as like medication dosages for my horses, or learning how to budget for the month for horseback riding lessons. So that really challenged me, and I didn't place well at all in the math, but I placed way above advanced college English. So placed right into the English classes, but then had to catch up in math. They told me that because I was so far behind, that it was going to take me 3 semesters of developmental math modules to catch up to the level that I needed to be at to take the courses that I needed for vet school. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to put me so far behind. But then it was these little modules, and so I really pushed myself, and in 1 semester passed all the modules that I needed to and got caught up to where I needed to be in 1 semester. So really that 1 semester got me up to where I needed to be at a college level, course level for where I needed to be.
Okay, let me make sure I'm hearing you right, because this is going to blow people's minds. You had never done academic math in your life until you applied to community college, and then it took you 1 semester of community college time to learn all of academic maths for like the first 12 grades.
Yeah.
Did you just like do nothing but math? Was it excruciating? Like, how was that?
Yeah, so it was also with other courses. So it's not like it wasn't the only course that I was taking that semester. I was also taking English and history and psychology in that semester too. So that was my first introduction into the world of taking tests. And I remember the first day of class when the teacher was like, does everybody have their syllabus and have you read through it? And I didn't even know what that word meant. I'd never heard the word syllabus before. I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know what a Scantron was. I didn't know how to take multiple choice questions. But for the math part of it, I sat down with my parents every night. I visited the tutoring center. I would go to office hours with my professor, and I was like, I just really want to get this done. And they helped me do all the homework that I needed to do and passed with flying colors in that 1 semester. So it was hard, it was challenging, but it wasn't impossible.
I feel like I need to know, like, the way you learned math does not fit into existing ideas of how math should and could be learned. If you have done no math by the time you're 17, it's kind of like you're supposed to be screwed. Like, there are people who like have done okay at math until 17 and have not been able to make it. So like, what is the difference between this story that we've heard and this reality that you've experienced? Are you just some extraordinary kind of person, or is this something other people can do reliably?
No, I think anybody could do this. And talking to my friends who have gone through the public school system, they talk about how torturous math class is, and it sounds like a lot of it is just busy work. They just have you do the same thing over and over and over again. And if you don't understand it, nobody's explaining it to you in a different way that helps you understand it. So then you're just doing the same busy work, and you don't know why you're doing it, and you don't know how it's going to be applicable. But what I really liked about the modules in the developmental course that I did is the word application questions. At first I hated them because it's like this whole paragraph, you don't know what to grab out of it, you don't know why you're doing it. But then my dad sat me down and was like, listen, if you want to go into the medical field, you're going to have to know how to calculate fluids going into an IV catheter, and you're going to need to know the drug concentration and how much drug is going into your patient and what is the half-life of that drug, so that when it wears off in the patient, you're going to be needing to administer more, and you can't overdose your patient, so you are going to have to use this in real life. So don't just think of it as, I'm doing this for nothing, I'm learning all this math for nothing. But then I look at my friends that went through the public school system, it's like, yeah, a lot of that busy work was for nothing. You're just sitting there and doing it, you don't know why you're doing it or why you're learning it.
So, correct me if I'm wrong in here, but maybe the reason you were able to get through 12 years of math in a semester was because you had the intrinsic motivation to do it. You like had reasons that weren't just for getting a grade or just for achieving something else.
Yeah.
And you hadn't been turned off from math from 12 years of being forced to do it in ways that didn't make sense for you.
Yeah. Yep.
Let me ask about the educational background of your parents, because it sounds like, your dad was able to talk to you about how math works and that kind of stuff. So tell me about that.
Yeah, so my dad is an anesthesiologist. He did try to push me towards nursing for a little while. He was telling me that I should become a CRNA, which is a certified registered nurse anesthetist, which basically does the same job that he does, but makes a pretty nice salary. I just think that working with people is pretty gross and love animals way more. My mom is a music therapist, but she has given that up to stay at home and raise her kids and unschool them.
Is unschooling or even just homeschooling something that requires highly educated parents, or is it more scalable than that?
It's definitely more scalable, and I think so many parents and even kids, they say like, oh, I could never be at home with my mom teaching me all day every day, or parents say I'm not smart enough to do that, or I can't believe your mom is teaching you all this stuff, and like, how does she know all this stuff? And the reality is that you as a parent, you're learning with your child. So my mom didn't know all of this stuff about animals and medicine and veterinary medicine until I was interested in it. And so I would say, I really love horses, let's learn about horses, or I really want to learn about this specific breed of dog, let's learn about that. And so we would go to the library together, we would look up books about it, we would Google things, and you learn about it through those interests, but you don't have to be a master know-it-all to know how to teach your child or how to show them how to learn about the things that they're interested in.
It does sound like it requires a lot of parental involvement and time. Is this something that requires one parent to be staying at home basically, or is it more adaptable than that?
I think it's more adaptable, because at first I did think that you had to just be at home all day, every day with your kids, especially when you're trying to do extracurricular activities and help learn through those. That's how I got a lot of my social life and my friends was from extracurriculars that you would go to during the day. But I have met some veterinarians, because I definitely want to be able to homeschool and unschool my kids eventually, but I also know that I want to be a veterinarian. And so there's some veterinarians that I've talked to, and they unschool their children or homeschool their children, and they work half days or flip-flop with their partners. So somebody's with the kids in the morning and then they switch at lunchtime, somebody's with the kids in the afternoon, but it does require a lot of parental involvement.
So in that sense, it sounds like there is a lot of maybe barriers in terms of just time and effort to unschooling, that not everyone can be expected to just do it. So maybe what would an ideal system for everyone look like to you?
So I've heard, I can't remember what country it was, but somebody called it forced schooling. So it's where you're still in the school system and they're still monitoring your learning, but the parents could take the kids to school and they're still self-motivated and learning on their own, but the parents don't have to be as involved. The parents can still go to work. There's still educators that are guiding the kids and helping them explore and learn, but not necessarily having as much parental involvement. So I really liked that idea. I can't remember, it was probably like Norway or Sweden or one of those cool places. But yeah, I really liked that idea and think that we have such a strict system here and nobody ever wants to stray away from it. And even when you talk about unschoolers, people are like, that's ridiculous, and they're unsocialized and they don't have friends and they don't know what they're doing. But I think we need to start looking at other ways that we can just having other opportunities and other options for, especially with kids with ADHD. So many of my friends have ADHD, they can't sit still, they're on the spectrum. Just having options for those kids that are having trouble sitting still or having problems with busy work for 6 hours a day.
Yeah, not sort of fitting into the very narrow definition of what a good student is in our current system. I want to get to the question of socialization a little bit later, because that's a good point you brought up. Do you want to give like maybe an overview story of like maybe what your day-to-day was like as a kid going through unschooling, or what sort of things you learned?
Yeah, so growing up, I really liked knitting, so I brought one of my knitted creations over here too. This is a sea turtle that I knit. I really liked being able to develop my own patterns and not follow patterns that were already made, so I would just look at something and be able to knit it. So when I was 6 years old, I just went up to my mom, was like, I want to learn how to knit. Don't know where that came from. So we started attending a knitting class every week, and I learned how to knit. And so now I have my own knitting business where I knit things for people, custom animals and hats and stuff. But growing up, I would go to knitting class, I would go to horseback riding, I would go to soccer, we would go to homeschool meetups. We didn't necessarily do a co-op like people talk about, but we had a group of friends that we would get together and go to the park with. Let's see. Didn't really have a set time in the morning that I would get up. Didn't have to be up at a specific time. Would get up, be in my pajamas, eat breakfast, read a book, do some knitting, get ready for soccer, go to horseback riding, play in the backyard. Like, there wasn't a specific schedule. Like, I knew when my activities were and when I had to be ready for them, but no set schedule for getting up or going to bed or doing things in the middle of the day.
To what extent did you choose all these extra activities, soccer and horseback riding, things that you had to schedule and go to versus suggested or decided by your parents?
Nothing was really decided by my parents. They were just kind of like, do you want to do a sport? Do you want to learn a musical instrument? So we went to a couple of orchestra concerts, and they had the musicians come down afterwards and let kids try out instruments, and I really loved violin. So I started taking violin lessons for a while. My mom, being a music therapist, taught me piano. So I played piano and violin, and then I wanted to learn trumpet at one point, so we switched from violin to trumpet lessons. And then once we moved to North Carolina, I taught myself guitar and ukulele, so a little bit of everything music-wise. Sports, for some reason I just really loved soccer, so I played soccer for about 10 years, and then I've always been obsessed with horses. We have pictures of me as a very small child on ponies and pony rides, and that has turned into having 3 horses in my backyard and wanting to go into veterinary medicine.
Another advantage maybe to not being restricted to a defined curriculum is you're free to explore all these different interests that may or may not lead to a career, but it's a much wider array of things to be experimenting with than you might get in a predefined curriculum.
Yeah.
Let's go back to that socialization question. Obviously, you mentioned the stereotype that anyone who's homeschooled doesn't get socialized well and becomes the weird kid, maybe.
Yeah.
So how did being unschooled affect your social life?
I am very extroverted. I love talking to people, love making friends, and I think being unschooled allowed me to be socialized with a variety of ages too. So I love hanging out with kids and teaching them about animals, but I also love talking to professors and people who are older than me and gaining knowledge from those conversations with them. Where a lot of my public school friends, they seem very uncomfortable socializing with people who are younger than them because they see them as less mature or as their younger siblings, and they're also uncomfortable with supervisors because they've grown up in a system where they're taught to be scared of those figures. So with knitting and soccer and horseback riding, that's where I gained a lot of my friends. One of my friends I'm still friends with, we grew up since we were like 4 years old together, and now we're both applying to vet school at the same time, and we've been friends throughout that entire time. One of my other really good friends, we did karate together, and we became black belts together. So we were with each other for 5 years doing that, and we still communicate on a daily basis. My siblings all have their little friends too that I also see as my friends. I love babysitting and hanging out with all the younger kids. And then when I got to community college, I made really strong connections with my professors, especially the ones that stepped in and helped me figure out what a Scantron was and figure out how to tackle multiple choice questions and how I should approach short answer questions. One of my professors in particular, Mr. Foster, he would sit down in his office with me on a weekly basis and say like, hey, like, why did you answer this answer on the question on the test? I know that you're smarter than this, and like, let's walk through what was going through your mind. And so each week we would meet up and he would kind of help me learn all the nuances of college and how to take an exam and how to study in a group and how to do all these different things that I had never been exposed to before.
You became comfortable talking with people older than you, talking with people younger than you. It really makes it sound weird that we think the idea of good socialization is putting a kid in a room with a bunch of other kids the same age and one adult who's an authority figure, and thinking that that results in, good socialization.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like, being unschooled and being comfortable talking with a variety of age ranges and things, did you find it easier to seek out and ask for help when you needed it? Or were those college professors just extra helpful?
No, I was very comfortable with asking for help when I needed it and took advantage of all of the different resources that are offered at college that I think a lot of people just brush to the side. So we had a STEM center at Wake Tech that a lot of people don't even know about, where it's just, there's always a professor in there and it's just couches. It's just a comfortable environment where you can go in and be struggling with your math homework and there's always somebody in there to help you. I would go to office hours for all sorts of different classes with all sorts of different professors, and they saw it as me going above and beyond to get a good grade in the class, but really I just wanted to make those connections with them and do well in the course. But nobody else would show up to those office hours. They'd be sitting there for 3 hours where they're not supposed to be doing any other work because that's supposed to be dedicated time to talk to students, and they're just sitting there all alone and nobody's coming to their office. So I definitely sought out those resources and experiences on my own, but the professors were more than helpful and more than willing to work with me on those things.
That brings me, there's this idea about conventional schooling versus unschooling or self-directed education, where the conventional way of sending kids to school actually kills motivation and makes people less interested in learning. And that sort of seems to ring true in that description of how the other students aren't really taking advantage of office hours and things like that. What do you think about that?
I do think that's true, and I almost see it as when I got to college, I was like fresh and ready for this new beginning, whereas everybody else had been in the school system for so long already that they were just like mentally drained and their idea of learning was just completely wrong, and they were like, I just have to learn this for the test and then I can clear my brain and wipe it completely and learn information for the next test. And I'm like, well, we should be learning it so that we're going to be using it in our careers, and we're not just learning it to be tested on it and then forget about it at the end of the semester. So it was really interesting to see their outlook on why they were taking the course and why they were learning specific things versus my outlook coming in.
Yeah, I remember I was like in maybe first grade. I remember I had never taken a spelling test before, and I was excited to take my first spelling test. And the thought of like now, even, as a teenager, being excited to take a test just sounds ridiculous. Yeah, so it's almost like you're starting college with that excitement of a first grader.
Yeah.
That sounds like such an advantage. I want to go back and ask you about that fake diploma.
Yeah.
Is that legal or is that fraud?
I don't know. I mean, my mom's technically my principal, my dad's technically my vice principal, and they really demanded that diploma. My mom tried to email them and say like, listen, we don't have one. They're like, she needs to have one in order to take classes. And we were like, okay, whatever you say. But other homeschoolers and unschoolers do the same thing. Like if we were on Facebook groups to find out how to do it. And there's all these people, they're like, how do I, like, where's the template? Where do I make this fake diploma at? And all these moms are like, here it is, I have it on my computer. So yeah, it's not out of the ordinary for homeschoolers to have fake diplomas and fake transcripts, but it's definitely weird.
Was it like super scrutinized? Like they took magnifying glasses to it, or they're just like, oh, there's the paper, cool, now you're in?
Yeah, they just look at it, see that there's a signature, and they're like, yeah, that's good. It's verified. We're good to go.
All right, well, do you have like nightmares about like, I don't know, some government organization going through and auditing it and being like, this isn't a real degree, we have to take everything away from you now?
I thought about it at first, but then I was like, well, they should look at my current classes and see that I'm up to par and that I shouldn't have to fake my way into the school system for them to know that I'm intelligent.
Can't really take that away from you at this point.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you're about to go into veterinary school. Mm-hmm. What else have you done job-wise or career-wise up to this point?
Let's see. So growing up, I babysat a lot because I love babies so much. Babysat for a lot of family friends. I got a job at a pottery shop when I was 14, 15. I was just like wiping off shelves and teaching people how to paint their pottery pieces and firing them in the kiln. After that, I worked at a animal hospital that my friend's dad owned. So I met her through musical theater, and her dad happened to be a veterinarian. So I got a job working there for a couple of years. Didn't fall in love with it as much as I thought, and so I decided maybe I'm gonna go into research. So I applied for an internship at the NIEHS, the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences in RTP, and got that internship and did research for an entire summer, paid research, which is very hard to find. Did that and did not love sitting at the lab bench every day, didn't like having to euthanize mice for projects. So I was like, maybe I don't want to do research. So I started looking into field biology. So I went to the museum and started looking around at the different internships that they had there. And there happened to be another veterinarian at the museum that was volunteering her time there at the museum and started talking to me about my career. I said that I didn't know if vet med was for me, and she said, well, I think you should give it another shot. Come work for me at my clinic. So I worked at her clinic for 2 years and then started realizing that I liked exotic animals more than cats and dogs. So I went back to the museum and they had an internship there for working with their entire museum collection, which is scorpions and tarantulas and snapping turtles and giant snakes and all sorts of the cool animals that I love. So I did an internship there for a while, and I was like, I really miss working with the clients from small animal, but really love working with the exotic animals. And the veterinarian there was like, well, why don't you apply for this job at a exotic animal hospital? So I applied for that, and they sent an email and sent a recommendation in, and that's how I got the current job that I'm at now during my gap year for hopefully when I get into vet school and start in August. So in the meantime, I'm just working full-time at this exotic veterinarian where I get to work with these super cool animals like kangaroos and axolotls, but also get the interaction of working with clients that I hold so dear to my heart because I have 27 pets and know what it's like to take those pets into the vet and have to trust them.
Were you doing all these internships like sort of during your high school years?
Yeah, so let's see, the pottery job and working at the first animal clinic that I worked at was high school transitioning into starting at Wake Tech at community college. And then I was working at that small animal clinic while I was at community college, and then I think I switched to the other animal clinic while I was at Wake Tech, and then like the majority of those internships were while I was in undergrad. So not too much while I was in high school, but a lot of extracurriculars while I was in high school helped point me in that direction. So I did a lot of 4-H. We led an equine 4-H group at my house where I would teach all the little kids about horses and how to behave around them. So I knew that I loved education. And I volunteered with Turtle Rescue Team while I was in high school, which is part of NC State's veterinary school where anybody can bring in an injured turtle, and they have volunteers that help take care of the turtles and feed them their little salads and do all their medications every day. So that helped me realize that I loved working with reptiles. So those kind of pointed me towards the veterinary field once I was in community college.
So it sounds like you got more opportunities being unschooled to just try different things and get a sense of where you wanted to head career-wise.
Yeah.
Here's some questions directly from my audience. Did you have trouble starting out in the professional world?
So during that first semester when I was really struggling catching up in my math classes, that was hard. But in terms of joining the professional world, it was pretty seamless. There was that one semester that was a little choppy, but after that, like, I felt like I was where I needed to be, belonged on campus, was making relationships with professors and friends and people in my class and people that were interested in veterinary medicine. So not as much of a transition period as you would expect from somebody going from no curriculum to being in a full credit college course.
Another career question from the audience. Do you feel like, and maybe this goes beyond career as well, but just more generally, do you feel like you missed any opportunities because of your unschooling?
No, I think I had more opportunities than the general student. I did feel a little bit crammed when I transferred to NC State, so I decided to go to community college first to save money, and then got my associate's degree and transferred to NC State for my bachelor's. And then that 2 years, I felt like I had to cram the whole college experience into those tiny 2 years, get all of my courses, get my veterinary hours for vet school, be involved in clubs, be involved on campus, make those relationships with professors for those letters of rec that I need for my vet school application, do all of these things in these teeny tiny little 2 years. Oh, and I wanted to study abroad. I knew that they had a study abroad to South Africa, and I was so excited about it. And I was just so stressed when I got there because I was like, I gotta hit the ground running, gotta do everything that I can, I gotta pack it all in there and then graduate on time. I felt like I still got everything that I needed, didn't miss out on anything, but I did feel a little bit rushed in those 2 years that I was trying to fit everything in.
What about, like, opportunities that might be considered sort of a part of the social life of maybe high school or something, things like prom or dances or things of that nature?
So I started taking musical theater classes and auditioned for a play, got into the play, and there was a super cute boy in the cast, and we started dating. We dated for 3 years, but because he went to high school, I went to his prom. So I went to that prom, and we went junior and senior year. And then there was a couple of homeschool proms, but they weren't as cool. They were pretty lame, where they were only playing Kids Bop the entire time, and everyone has to stay distance, like no slow dancing, no touching each other, and everyone had glow sticks. So I was like, okay, all right. So I went to one of those, went to 2 high school proms, and then NC State has a couple of dances and balls. So I took my boyfriend at the time, took him to those dances too. So I got my fill of going to prom and dances and getting all dressed up and taking pictures.
Yeah, I'm sure there are people who are thinking about unschooling who would be relieved to hear that they don't have to give up those things in order to be unschoolers.
Yeah, yeah. Or their kids can go to the Kids Bop homeschool proms.
Yeah. Also, hey, if you're into that, no judgment.
No judgment, no judgment. Just not for me.
Yeah. This one may not apply because you're still a student and you're in a gap year and stuff, but I know that for people who are still sort of in that student stage, it's kind of a different question. So I'm going to ask this the way it was written, and then also maybe another way that might make more sense to answer.
Okay.
Is how much money do you make, or do you make enough to live comfortably?
Yeah, so I am making a student salary right now in my gap year. Of course, still getting experience for veterinary schools. You have to take that with a grain of salt. Currently living at home with my parents, so I don't have to worry about paying rent or paying electricity. And when I graduate with a bunch of debt from vet school, I'm hoping to make $60K. So we'll be able to balance it out. Still not the grand salary that everybody thinks of when they think of a doctor or veterinarian. But I have looked at how much I'm going to make in relation to how much education, how much money I'm putting into that education. So I am comfortable, but I also don't have to pay rent and utilities and all that.
Because there's this idea that if you're giving up school, you're giving up this whole, this opportunity to make a good living, and there's this idea that you're constraining yourself to this very alternative lifestyle, and you're not doing that at all.
No, you don't have to go out and live in a forest in a mushroom circle and only wear skirts and talk to the elves.
Although I have talked to a couple unschoolers who are basically out in the middle of nowhere building their own houses, and that sounds
super cool. But no, you don't have to give all that up. And I do know a couple of friends and a couple of dads of friends that don't even have high school diplomas, and they're making more money than I will ever make as a vet. So you still don't have to get a high school homeschool made up diploma or go to college or even go to community college. Like, there's still ways that you can make it work.
I think a lot of this anxiety about needing to do well in school in order to have a successful life comes from this idea that there's a track that needs to be followed, and if you just stay on the track and follow the track, you will end up at success.
Yeah.
To what extent do you agree with that, and do you feel like unschooling has given you a different perspective, maybe that it's not so much about following a track?
Yeah, so even though I was unschooled, I also thought that there was this one track that I needed to follow, and if I strayed any little bit off the track, I was gonna fail at life. And so there were many nights that I would end up crying, and I'm like, what am I gonna do with my life? How am I gonna get into college and compare with other people that have been in the public school system their entire lives? But now I see that you make your own path. You don't have to stick to this traditional path. You do whatever works for you, and there might be some swerving on and off the path, but you'll get to where you need to be at your own pace.
Yeah, I found in my life too, because I also shared that mindset in high school, where I was like, I don't want to choose my own college. I want someone to tell me where to go to college, and I'll go there, and then I'll graduate and make money. But then I realized once I started giving myself permission to make my own path is when things started getting better.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting with applying to vet school too. Like, they don't even care about what your grades were in high school. And so many people are like, I have to get these good grades, and I have to get this grade in this course to get into college. And then when I apply to a grad program, they're going to be looking at every single grade. But vet school didn't even want to see like my fake high school transcript. They just wanted to see undergrad on.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stress of kids, probably unschoolers as well, but especially kids in conventional schools, is this idea that what you do now is like make or break for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And a lot of stress comes from that.
Yeah.
And you said you kind of had moments like that, but do you think it was on the same level of stress that conventional schoolers might have gone through?
No. And I talked to so many of my friends and they're like, yeah, you had those times where you were crying in your room and you were upset and you didn't know like what was going to happen in your life, but at least you didn't have to go through this many years of complete torture in the public school system and bullying and forced to sit and not be able to go to the bathroom or eating at a specific time and all the homework you have to do when you get home and your parents yelling at you because you didn't do the homework. I'm like, yeah, I guess like you guys had it a bit worse.
Yeah, when you put it that way, yeah, it does sound that way. It's like, yeah, stress about the future might be natural, but why add all those other things on top of it? A very fitting question that happens to come from the audience was it hard taking a different path?
I mean, it was challenging and difficult, and I think everybody has their own struggles with their path. But I grew up completely proud of my path, and I love sharing my path and talking with others and trying to talk to people who are younger than me that might have been at the part where I was crying in my bed and try to relate with them and say like, look, it's gonna be okay. Like, you don't have to stress this much about what's gonna happen 5-10 years down the road. You can just enjoy life and figure out what you are interested in, what you're passionate about, and figure out how to make that a career where you can live well but still do what you love.
Yeah, I think just even like the bullet points of your story help illustrate that. You never took formal classes and then you went pretty much straight into college to become a veterinarian.
Yeah.
Like, just the fact that that is even remotely possible is super encouraging, I think. Here's one. Did you have anyone doubt that you were going to make it in life?
I think just myself. Just myself in those moments where I was looking at friends and I would see like their homework or see the tests that they were pulling out. And of course it looks like Greek to me because I haven't been learning those tests and learning math that way. And so I would look at it and be like, oh my God, how am I ever gonna be as smart as those people? But then once I got into college, I was like, I feel more intelligent than like 75% of the people here, so it's okay. But before I got into college, there were those moments of doubt where I was like, I don't know if I'm as smart as those people. And my mom was really good at sitting me down and being like, listen, you need to get over whatever you're going through. You're not dumb just because you can't look at this material that they've been studying for an entire semester and you don't know what's going on. That doesn't mean you're not smart.
That's good. It's really important to have support like that.
Yeah.
How many other unschoolers have you known in your life, including your siblings?
Probably 3 or 4 families that we're pretty close with that have gone with no curriculum or little to no curriculum.
Among those 3 to 4 families, did that approach ever not work? Did unschooling ever not work out well for someone?
I mean, everybody has their different paths, but I don't think that any of them would say that they failed or failed life or getting to where they wanted to be. One of my closest friends, she grew up unschooled with me, and we would quiz each other on little math questions and stuff, going back and forth together. She now has her own crochet business and she's doing well. Another one of my friends that was unschooled is a professional barrel racer and trains horses in the horse industry, so she's doing well for herself. Another one of my friends who was unschooled is now also applying to vet school at the same time. So I think we have all these success stories. Oh, and my aunts and my uncles. So the reason that we started unschooling was because my mom saw the way that my aunts and uncles were raised. And they're around the same age as me, a little bit older. So she saw how my grandma was raising them and unschooling them and started unschooling us. And so watching their success stories too. But not enough success stories are shared. Like, nobody knows about all of these unschoolers, or even people that are successful in their career fields. You don't know. Their whole path could have been unschooled up until college, and they just don't talk about it. So it was really cool to find the Grown Unschoolers website and see all of these people that have gotten to where they need to be. But with my inner friend circle, everybody's doing well.
Yeah, I think there's this idea that unschooling is sort of a high-risk option.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I don't think that's true. And there were moments when I doubted it. Like I said, when my brother would just play Minecraft all day, every day, and I was like, wow, like, is he ever gonna do anything? Like, how is he ever gonna do schoolwork? And I'm running around taking care of the horses and trying to get myself ready for college courses by watching YouTube videos online and do all this extra stuff. And he was just sitting there playing Minecraft all day, every day. And I was like, yikes, we'll see what happens with him. But here he is now becoming a nurse. So I think you do have to put some faith in it and trust that it is going to work, which takes a lot on the parents' part to kind of trust the process. But
let me put it this way. This might be sort of a fun question. What would it take to mess unschooling up? What would it take for it to not work?
I want to say little parental involvement, because it does take more guidance than not. But I also feel like if my parents weren't as involved, that it would just make me more self-motivated to do well. So I don't necessarily think that there's a way that you can mess it up unless you're completely like demotivating the child to learn. Like,
okay, well, that's pretty powerful. Like, as long as people have just a baseline concern and awareness of the needs of their children, then
yeah.
Is that kind of all it takes?
Yeah, and I've talked to a lot of parents before, and specifically one that comes up is one of my coworkers. They're having problems with their kid, especially with online learning. They're having a hard time getting him to sit down and take these courses and really focus. And I was like, just let him be. Just let him. And they do go out on the weekends and they go and they study frogs and snakes and go out to the pond and see all these critters. And that's what he really loves doing. He doesn't like sitting in front of the computer and being forced to do things that he already knows how to do because he's learned this stuff already in life. And I was like, just unschool him, please, just unschool him. And it's hard for parents to kind of take a step back and relax and let their kid learn. So I do think these success stories need to be shared so that they can have a little bit more faith in what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to the idea that unschooling might be harder for parents than it is for the kids because of all the social narratives that you have to go against, and you have to put sort of a strange amount of trust in your own kids. That's not common in our society. We don't trust kids that much.
Yep.
Jumping in here real quick. So in the time since this was recorded, I have come across unschoolers on the internet who were unhappy with their experiences. I have tried to get someone willing to do an interview, but understandably, negative childhood experiences are not a super comfortable thing to spill your guts about on camera. So if one of those interviews comes to fruition, I will let you know. I don't want to go too far out on a limb, but based on things that I've learned in the past year or so, here are some ways I think unschooling can go wrong. If the parents are straight up neglectful or abusive, obviously, or even just inattentive to the child's needs and interests, like Meghan mentioned. Isolation is another one. I came across one guy who apparently wasn't even allowed to interact with kids who were going to school, but even a milder lack of a community to learn in can be a problem. Also, if parents aren't really being supportive of the child's choices, for example, if the child wants to attend a school but the parents don't allow that, that'll cause some problems. And another sort of non-obvious one that's worth mentioning is when the parents are unwilling or unable to question or reevaluate their own parenting style from time to time. Unschooling is not just for the kids, as they say. So I'd be remiss not to mention all of that, but back to the interview. Do you have any advice for parents or kids who might be thinking about unschooling and maybe don't have a full picture yet?
Yeah, I think it's really important to find other parents to talk to that are also going through the same thing, or parents that have already raised unschoolers. So my mom is a super big advocate. She'll be getting on Facebook groups all the time and talking to other moms who are just starting their unschooling journey. So I think it's really important to have that support group so you're not just going into this on your own. And for kids that are starting their unschooling journey, I would say try not to compare yourself to anybody else who is the same age or younger than you or older than you, especially if they're in the public school system. I did that a lot, where I would think I wasn't up to par or up to quote-unquote standard of education, and I would think that I wasn't intelligent. But you need to be ready to fire back at them and question, how are they learning? What are they learning? Do they remember what they learned 2 years ago in that semester where they just crammed all that knowledge into their head for that one test? And show them that you're still intelligent, even though you're maybe not necessarily ready to take a test on a Scantron and know how to do math when it's just a single line instead of a medication dosage. So you have to be ready to talk to them and engage in conversation with them.
I want to try to get a sense of your attitude about failure and like expectations when you're at the beginning stages of learning something. So maybe that first semester of math in community college would be a good example, or just anything else when you're learning a new thing. how do you approach it? And do you have to like overcome any shame or anything from not knowing things right away?
I don't think I had shame from not knowing things right away. I went into community college with, again, such a fresh mind that I was just excited to be learning everything that I was learning about, and felt like going into each course that I was already on the same knowledge level as a lot of the people that had taken, so like biology. All these people had taken biology in high school, but they still didn't know any of the material that we were going over in class. And I was like, wow, like, I feel like I don't know anything. But the girl sitting next to me that had already taken this class before in high school was like, yeah, I don't know anything either. I was like, okay, that's kind of interesting. Like, it's just completely gone out of your mind, but okay. But I don't ever feel like I had a sense of failure. I was worried that I was gonna have to take those 3 semesters and that was gonna push me back a year. But my parents sat down with me and said, listen, even if you do have to take 3 semesters, it's not the end of your life. It's a year and a half that you're gonna be catching up on these math courses, and you can take other classes in the meantime, and maybe that's gonna make your 4-year college journey a little bit longer, and that's okay, because you don't have to finish college in 4 years. Everybody also has this idea that you have to cram college into these 4 years, and then they call it a victory lap when you take a 5th year, but it's okay to take 6 or 7 years to get through what you need to get through.
So it sounds like you, like a lot of conventionally schooled people have weird hang-ups in certain places that it seems like, you know, they're harder on themselves when they struggle to do something at the beginning. I'm sorry, I have to jump in again because I just noticed how much I was like projecting in that moment. I am the conventionally schooled people. I have weird hang-ups and am too hard on myself when I'm not good at something in the beginning. It's just weird seeing myself externalized like that, you know, like, oh, I'm just asking for a friend. Have you ever felt anything like that, or just having done learning at your own pace your whole life, it's not really a problem for you?
I think with math, I was a little frustrated at first. History, I didn't have much history background. I was a little frustrated with history at first, but overcame those pretty quickly. I think a lot of those hang-ups do come from our societal norms, where it's like, oh, you have to learn this, you have to learn it on this day, you have to learn it super fast, and then you're good to go. And if you don't, then you're a failure. But I think coming into community college without having that mindset for 12 years of my life before entering college, that I didn't necessarily have that mindset, but I have seen friends that are like that, where it's like, I have to learn this by this day at this time, and if I don't, I'm going to die and I'm not gonna graduate and it's gonna be awful. But I could be a little bit dramatic, but I don't think I had that mindset in college.
You went through your entire childhood without any formal classes. Then you've now gone through college and are entering adult life. So with that perspective, do you think anything should be mandatory? Any curriculum or anything should be taught to everyone no matter what?
A second language. I feel like everybody should have a second language. And no, that's it. That would be the only thing. Language. Just a single language. I think that we need to be more aware of people that are not like ourselves, and learning a second language really helps with that, and especially going into the veterinary field. I feel that learning a little bit of Italian and Spanish has helped me already. There is a standardized test that you have to take every year as a homeschooler in the state of North Carolina. When we lived in California, we didn't have to do that. But you can take the test at any grade level and they don't look at the results. So you can just literally take like a first grade test every year and you don't have to do great on it. So we would just, my mom would use it as practice for us to like learn how to take tests, and we would just go through them every year, and then you keep the results on file in case the homeschool police were ever to come to your door and ask for those test results. But that hasn't happened yet, so that is something that you have to do every year, but it's not a big deal, and I don't really think that should be mandatory.
So just a second language, nothing else?
Yep.
If you were to make a curriculum, the only thing on it would be some sort of second language?
Yep.
Are you fluent in another language, or are you saying that more out of a desire to be more fluent?
More out of a desire to be more fluent in another language, and having friends that are bilingual, and then seeing people who think that English is the the superior language and don't know any other languages.
Here's another one from the audience, and this is a very broad one. How happy are you, and would you change anything?
I am very happy and love talking about my unschooling journey and kind of pushing people's minds to question what we're doing with our public school system and how everybody thinks there's one way that it is, and that's the way that it has to be, and you can't do anything else to stray from that one way. I would not change anything. I was unschooled since the day I was born, so never was in the public school system. The only time I was in public school was to take driver's ed, and that was very scary. But no, I wouldn't change anything, and I am looking forward to unschooling my own kids in the future.
Yeah, that's a pretty big endorsement. Meghan, thank you so much for taking the time for this interview. It's been amazing. I can't wait to share it with people.
Of course, of course.
Apparently, I could wait to share it with people because it's been like a year and a half. But no, I am happy I finally got my ducks in a row with this. I am planning on putting out more videos on this channel, but I'm not making any promises. So if you want to subscribe to see more stuff like this, I promise I will not spam your feed. So regardless, thank you for watching.